Hey everybody, Collin here with CH Sports, and this is what is in my bag. Hey everybody, Collin here with CH Sports, bringing you guys another video to the channel. Sorry for the lack of coverage recently. For anybody that knows me, when I originally got into disc golf, I'm a competitor. I wanted to be able to come in and compete. And so recently I've been, taking a little bit of a step away from making YouTube content and focusing a lot more of that time on getting better as a player. And so that has led to less and less YouTube coverage. And like I said, anybody that knows me knows that I'm an athlete, knows that I'm a competitor. So although I would love to be bringing you guys more YouTube coverage, I also know that about myself, that I'm a competitor, and honestly, I wouldn't be getting the most out of myself if I wasn't competing. So the vision of this YouTube channel is going to change a little bit. It's going to be a little bit less full tournament coverage and a little bit more about my career and kind of me taking the step from being a high MA1 level player all the way into being an MPO level player and trying to cash, as well as move up into the podium and eventually try to win an MPO event. And I think I'm going to use this channel to kind of chronicle that and show you guys and I kind of want to just show you guys the journey of what it's like trying to get from that MA1 level player all the way up to MPO level. So if that's something that interests you, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It definitely helps out the channel. Figured the best way to start off this new journey would be showing you guys what is in my bag. A little bit more about me as a player. A lot of you guys know me as a content creator and the guy behind the camera, but in front of the camera, I am currently a 971 rated player. I was the 2022 Portland Open champion in the amateur division, and I'm currently unsponsored. So I have a pretty wide variety of what I carry in my bag, and let's go ahead and get into it. So let's go ahead and start with my putters. First of all, my putting putters. I putt with the Birdie Disc Golf Marvel. This one is a nice and beat up one. I throw it for little short approach shots as well as low ceiling spin putts. It's a little bit more beat in, so has a little bit more glide and will stay in the air a little bit longer. I'll also use it on some pretty heavy tailwind putts. Nice beat up Marvel. And this one's a little bit newer. I use this for most of my inside the circle putting. I like to keep pretty much one fresh putter in the bag and one nice beat up putter in the bag. Pretty much you can decipher that as inside the circle and outside the circle. So this is currently what I'm using to putt inside the circle. Big shout out to my boy Paige Hurtado for hooking me up with this. So that is the Birdie Disc Golf Marvel. Another approach putter that I have is the AGL Madrone. I would say this is pretty similar in flight to the beat up Marvel that I have. This thing is nice and beat in. Out of the box, it flies like an end of a Rhino, has a thumb track on it. It's fairly straight with a little bit of fade at the end out of the box, but this one's pretty much beat up to be just dead straight. So now the main difference between this and the Marvel that I use is that this one doesn't really have as much glide. So if I want something that's going to kind of glide through its finish, I'll throw the Marvel. If I want something that's kind of going to get out of the air but go straight all the way up to about 200 feet, I'll throw the AGL Madrone. The other two putters in my bag, first starting off with a TSA Praxis. If you haven't tried out the Praxis yet, I definitely would recommend it. It is pretty much just the definition of dead straight. Pretty much right out of the box, these things are dead straight. This one's a little bit more beat in, so it actually will flip a tiny bit for me. Not something that I would throw into a lot of wind, but other than that, it's perfect for pretty much every scenario. If you start it on hyzer, it'll kind of hold that hyzer. Throw it on Annie, it'll hold the Annie. What I really like it for is those kind of dead straight 280-foot shots. So it flies a lot like a mid for me, but I can't throw it quite as far as a mid. So if the hole's about 280 and pretty much dead straight, I'm throwing my TSA Praxis. And then my final approach disc in the bag is a Z Zone. Big shout out to Huck Lab for dyeing this one up for me. This one is nice and beat up at this point, so it does get a little bit of glide for me. It's still very overstable, which I love. It's pretty much puddle top. I don't know if you guys can see that, but feels great in the hand. I pretty much only throw it for forehand approaches. I will occasionally throw it for a backhand if I need something to just move left the entire time, but mostly a forehand approach disc for me. I can throw this up to about 250 or so. Yeah, if you haven't thrown a zone before, go check one out. So that's it for putters in my bag. Let's go ahead and move on to mid-ranges. All right, guys, let's go over the mid-ranges in my bag. Not much of a mid-thrower, so I only bagged 3 of them, 2 different molds. Most understable being this nice beat-up Elite Z Buzz that I got from my buddy Nick Wolter. Huge shout-out to him for this guy. At this point, it flies more like a meteor. It's super understable. I can throw it... Sorry, there's people watching me. So yeah, like I was saying, this thing mostly flies like a meteor at this point. It's nice and beat in. If I throw it flat, it'll kind of just hold a nice settled turn all the way to the ground. I can throw this thing all the way up to about 320. I love this thing for tailwind shots. I love it in the woods. I love it when I'm stuck in a situation that I can't really maneuver very much. You know, I'm stuck in a bush and I only have a little bit of an arm swing to develop. So love the Elite Z Buzz for any kind of tricky situation or just big high turnover shots, also in the woods. Next up in the line of stability is just a regular ESP Buzz. This thing is pretty much the definition of stable. It is dead straight with just a tiny bit of finish at the end, just enough to hold its integrity throughout the entire flight. If the hole is about 320 to 330 or less, and it calls for pretty much just a dead straight shot, I am throwing my ESP Buzz. And finally, another Paige Hurtado special, the Terminal Velocity Ursus. This is, I would compare it to something like a Justice. It's not quite that beefy, but it is a very overstable mid. I really like it because, as you can see, the plastic is very bendy, and so when it hits the ground, it kind of has the tendency to just fold into itself and sit. I like this over something like a Justice because it will kind of glide through its finish. The Justice for me is a little bit too overstable to really bag it, so I throw this Ursus instead. Get that extra little 10 to 15 feet more of distance. Like I said, I don't really throw mids all that often, so when I do, I definitely want a difference between the different distance ranges. This flies very similar to the zone that I bag, but it goes another 15 to 20 feet. So if the hole is, instead of 250, maybe it's in that like 270-ish range, I'll throw my Ursus. And that's it for mids in my bag. Let's go ahead and move on to fairways. All right, guys, these are all the fairways in my bag. I bag a lot of fairways because I don't have all that much arm speed. So this is kind of where my game lives. I definitely consider myself to be a decent fairway thrower, and it's kind of where my biggest improvement in my game has been over the last year. So starting with the most understable, I have this CH Sports Open Heat. Pretty much only throw this for rollers exclusively at this point. If there's like a raging tailwind or something like that, maybe I'll throw it for an air shot, or it calls for like a big high turnover shot, I'll throw it then. But yeah, this thing is so ridiculously unstable. It was already unstable to start, and then I took it up to Bend for Battle at Bachelor this year, beat it up against some rocks, and now it is ridiculously unstable. But very good for get out of jail shots, very good for rollers, quick flip rollers, trouble sidearms when I'm like really tucked in a bush. Yeah, if you haven't checked out a Heat, go check one out. Next up in the line of stability is this 750 Prodigy F5. It's the only Prodigy disc that I bag, but my buddy Josiah Nelson, huge shout out for hooking this up for me. I was a longtime FD thrower, and more specifically the Night Strikes. This thing flies pretty much identical to what I liked out of my Night Strikes. It's pretty much just dead straight. Flies a lot like that Praxis that I was showing you guys earlier, except it goes maybe an extra 70 to 80 feet. Love this thing in the woods. Love it for any kind of, pretty much just any dead straight shot that's under like 360. Yeah, and the biggest part I love about it is that it is replaceable. That's why I put it in the bag over what I used to bag in this slot, which was a Night Strike. Loved my Night Strikes, but yeah, they are just impossible to replace, and having that kind of stress when you're throwing out on the course, like if you lose this thing, you're never going to be able to replace it. This 750 F5, although it is also expensive to find this exact run, it is definitely a lot less expensive than trying to find a night strike in the stage of wear that I had them in. So huge shout out to Josiah for giving me this, and yeah, that's what I'm throwing for dead straight fairway shots. Next up in the line of stability is this Z Tracker. I love this thing for a very similar flight to that F5, except instead of tailing right at the end, this one will actually tail left at the end. I would also consider this thing to be very, very straight, but like I said, the two tendencies between those two discs kind of covers me on most fairway shots, especially for my backhand. I don't have a whole lot of power, so I don't need the most overstable things in the world for my backhands. Yeah, so this tracker kind of covers most of my fairway slots between this and that F5. Yeah, so anything that is like 340 to 350 and has like a slight moving left shot at the end, I'm throwing my Z Tracker. And then the final fairway mold that I have is Raptors. So I bagged 4 Raptors. The least stable Raptor that I bag is this Huck Lab Bottom Stamp ESP Tour Series Ulibarri Raptor. Geez, that is a mouthful. I love this thing. If I've got it beat in to fly mostly like an Undertaker at this point, honestly. It's a 9-speed. It has a bunch of glide for a Raptor now, and honestly, it'll actually like flip up out of my hand. So instead of bagging a Undertaker, I love the mold familiarity with my Raptors, so I have one that flies like an Undertaker. I love it for like long flip-up hyzer forehands. Pretty much anything in the woods, I'm throwing this disc. I live in Oregon, so I need a lot of discs that I can rely on in the woods, and this thing is definitely one of them. So big shout out to Huck Lab, and big shout out to Hunter Gates for hooking me up with this guy. Next up in the line of stability, one more Page Furtado shout out, is this 2020 Tour Series Z Ulibarri Raptor. This one is just a little bit more stable than that yellow one that I was just showing you guys. It's definitely not quite as overstable as the other two in my bag, but it has that little bit of reliable stability at the end of the flight, and so I really like it for dead straight forehands that I want to get back at the end. If I want to throw that yellow Raptor, which is kind of my go-to disc, but I need to be throwing into a headwind, this one comes out a lot, and I also like it for long, stretched-out backhand hyzer shots. I can throw this thing up to about 320, 330, forehand and backhand. So yeah, that is my 2020 Tour Series Ulibarri Raptor. Next up in the Ulibarri Raptor collection is the 2021 Metal Flake Tour Series Ulibarri Raptor. This one is definitely the most overstable of the 3 that I've shown you so far. It is very reliable, and I can throw it into headwinds, but it is not just like absolutely no glide, doesn't fly at all kind of beef. It's definitely reliably beefy, but it's throwable as well. So I can throw this one up to about 290 or so, and I throw it for a lot of like big skip forehands or just overstable forehands in general. I'll be throwing this Raptor. And then finally, if I just need absolute beef, something that's not going to fly very far at all, maybe go 250 if I throw it really hard, I'm throwing this Captain's Raptor. If you haven't checked one out, this thing is one of the most reliably overstable discs that I've ever thrown. So yeah, go check one out. Alrighty, that is all my fairways. Let's go ahead and get into the distance drivers. Alright guys, I am a typical 970 rated player. I bag way more distance drivers than I probably need. But between all of these discs, I am very confident pretty much attacking any course. So let's go ahead and get into my distance drivers. The first mold that I bag is the Innova Shrike, and really this is a I-blend Faro. For those of you that don't know, a Faro is a Shrike. It's literally the exact same mold. This thing is, I would call it pretty understable. I can't really get it up to speed, so it doesn't really fly understable for me. The shot that I'm throwing this for is pretty much anything over 400 feet that I need to turn right pretty much the entire way. I'm throwing my I-blend Faro. Next up in the line of stability is my beat up Halo Shrike. This thing is pretty much just dead straight at this point. It doesn't really turn or fade. It just kind of goes dead straight for me, which I absolutely love. If it's windy, I probably won't be pulling this out as much. But yeah, my Halo Shrike, one of my go-tos for sure. Anything over 400 feet, I'm throwing this thing. And then if I want to throw that strike, but I need a little bit of reliable stability at the end, I'm throwing this strike. I would compare this thing to just a stock Star Destroyer. I love the mold familiarity in my bag, so I like to keep a lot of the same mold, so that's why I bag this over something like a Destroyer, even though it's very similar in flight. If you haven't already, go check out a Halo Shrike. Alright guys, the next distance driver mold in my bag is the Innova Wraith. I bag 3 of them in different stages of wear and different plastic types. The first one is just a stock Star Wraith. Huge shout out to my buddy Paul Crisco for hooking me up with this. It is nice and beat up at this point, so I can throw it for a shot very similar to that Fairway. It'll just kind of hold a little bit of turn it all the way through its flight and then maybe flex back at the very end. It doesn't go quite as far, but it definitely has a little bit more control over my 13 speeds. So if I'm trying to find the fairway, but I also want like 380 to 400 feet of distance, I'm throwing this Wraith. This is just a little bit more overstable. This, when I first got it, was a very, very overstable Wraith. For anybody that doesn't know, the Halo plastic is typically more overstable. So this Halo Wraith was originally very overstable, but I've gotten it very beat up, and it is ridiculously pop top, which gives it a lot of glide as well. So I really like it for shots that are like 370 to 390. That are going to hold hyzer the entire way. I like it for really high sky hyzers because of that glide. Yeah, and so I can rely on this in the wind. I also throw it for a lot of forehands. This is probably what I would consider to be my go-to driver. And then if I want just a little bit more stability than that, I have this brand new Halo Wraith in the bag. This one's from the 2022 run, which are a little bit straighter, but this one is super flat, which makes it a little bit more overstable. So yeah, this is definitely my headwind fighter, and pretty much like my most overstable disc in my bag, except for one of them. But out of the discs that I throw a lot, this is probably my most overstable option. And finally, what I would consider a utility disc is my Star Excalibur. I pretty much only throw this thing for forehands, and I only throw it when it's really windy or I need something to take a huge skip. Absolutely love my Excalibur for nice and reliable overstable shots. And now the bag itself. I carry the grip equipment. I believe this is the BX series bag. I won this bag, so I actually don't know too much about it. At North Umpqua Invitational this year, which is a tournament that Scott Withers runs, so shout out for hooking me up with this, Scott. They were giving away a bag to the person that could put up the highest rated round above their rating. At the time I was like 952 rated, and I put up a 1020 rated first round. And so I was able to win this bag, and it carries pretty much everything I need. So absolutely love this bag. And that is it for everything in my bag. Thanks for checking this out. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.